Stephanie, are you there?
Hi, this is Jason Flatt. No, Stephanie will not be joining us tonight.
Okay. Looking.
David Buck is the new Stephanie for tonight, I believe.
Yes, Mr. David Buck is the new Stephanie for tonight.
And I'm pausing here because I'm waiting to see if we have a quorum.
I'd appreciate it if you continue to pause for a moment. We're working some technical issues.
Okay. Let me know when you guys are ready on your end, Jason. And hopefully by the time you are, I see Ron now, so I think we've got 4.
Is there a way to fix that?
Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just testing the audio here quickly. Sounds pretty good for me. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Well, that's awesome. We should start our recording on our end then. I think that's already in process. So, Mr. Martsky, whenever you'd like to get the show on the road, it's all yours.
Okay, we will start. Call to order the Wednesday, June 16th, 2021 meeting of the Landmarks Commission. We will take the roll first. Ron?
Can we get the PowerPoint up too?
I'm here.
Ian?
Here.
David?
Present.
Susan? Alderman Stoyer? And Justin? Okay, I show Justin, Mark, and Susan as absent. Maybe they're just late in logging on. Next item on tonight's agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Here. Sorry, it was on mute. I'm here.
All right, thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
There was a little bit of confusion with the agenda that was sent out, but I'm assuming everybody has the current agenda in front of them. Are there any proposed changes or comments on the agenda? Hearing none, I would look for a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda is approved unanimously. Next item is item D. That's the approval of the minutes from the May 19th, 2021 meeting of the Landmarks Commission. Those minutes are available on the Civic Clerk site. I assume everybody's had an opportunity to see those minutes. Does anybody have any comments or corrections on the minutes? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Ron. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by David. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. On to item E, which is regular business. The first item is Certificate of Appropriateness 20-13. This is consideration of a requested extension for porch repair and painting at 637 South Madison. Jason, would you like to give us the description?
I'd enjoy that, yes. 637 South Madison came before the Landmarks Commission in July of 2020, and we're approaching a one-year anniversary of that. Here you see not only the location of the house, but also the letter that was sent. And there was a condition on this COA approval which said that all wood portions of the porch needed to be painted. And of course, the approval expires 1 year from the date of this letter. So on the next slide, to refresh your memory, We have on the left a picture of the project as it currently stands. The porch has been replaced. You see a lot of unpainted wood components. Picture on the upper right is as the property looked when it came to you in 2020 for your COA approval. And a couple of sketches at the bottom just showing what was approved. And again, what we had here was all the wood stuff would be painted or not left in a natural wood appearance. So procedurally, we need to have either an extension or the denial of an extension and then proceeding to fines. But I think the request before you is to extend the COA timeframe. That extension, the amount of time is up to you if you so choose to grant this. I look at this as somewhat precedent setting. You'll be saying, yeah, we can do 6-month extensions, 1-year extensions, whatever you like, or 0-month extensions. But I can provide no particular guidance on how to proceed.
The comment I guess I would make to the commission is simply painting is a weather-dependent activity. You can't paint in January in Wisconsin. So if we were to consider an extension, I guess my recommendation would be that we grant the extension until October 31st, which would take us through the current painting season. I feel that's a reasonable amount of time to get this work done that wasn't completed in the last year.
If that is your motion, I would second that motion.
I will go ahead and make that, convert that into a motion.
And I will stick with my seconding.
Yeah, so then there's a motion on the floor. Are there any other discussion?
The only thing that I might add to that is that an extension of that magnitude should not need a further extension beyond the October 31st, that it would not be an extent. No, we would not be looking at an extension on an extension to the.
I would agree.
Yeah, likewise.
Yep.
Any other comments?
This will be the final extension.
Okay, motions on the floor is to grant the extension until October 31st, 2021. We will do a roll call vote on this. Ian,
Yes.
David,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Alderman Stoyer is absent. Justin is absent. Susan,
Yes.
and the chair also votes yes. Motion passes unanimously. Next item is Certificate of Appropriateness 21-06. Consideration with possible action on a design review for a new garage located at 704 South Jackson Street. Jason?
Yes, this is a return item. Again, it's the Lenz home at the corner of Cass and South Jackson Street. We've received some additional information related to the scale of the proposed garage. So on the left is a photograph of the property as viewed from South Jackson. On the right is that same photo with an approximate scale representation of what the proposed garage would look like. I guess I invite you to take a moment and soak that in. If we go to the next slide, we have a few views from around the neighborhood. The two at the top are of the house in question, and this gives you some sense of the neighboring homes, the scale of those. The two at the bottom are pictures of garages on the opposite side of Cass Street in the immediate vicinity of the Lenz home. I guess I felt like Stephanie was perhaps going to collect some more information on the heights of these other garages, but that has not happened, and perhaps my feeling was misplaced. Maybe that wasn't going to happen. But on the next slide, this was the original recommendation from a few meetings ago, and I put it back in your hands. You can either take action at this point or discuss or do as you please. Can you go back to?
I guess I would ask for discussion from the committee members.
if I can jump in here real quick. I thought that the owner did a very nice job of providing some photo montage of the existing and proposed. You can see by the red tick marks the height. I think, in my perspective, what this shows is that 3 or 4 feet of the existing home, plus the high floor to floor of the first floor, the high floor to floor of the second, and the mass of the roof really does put into perspective the size of the garage. And it doesn't appear nearly as big as one might have presumed it might from the drawing of the garage alone. My 2 cents is that the scale is appropriate for the size of the home. And I will leave my comments at that for the moment.
Just a quick reminder too, this is the narrow side of the garage.
Correct. Yep.
Other comments?
Sure, I'd like to jump in here. Given that we've been going around on this for a little bit, I went to the ordinance, the city ordinance, as well as the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines to find information to take a position. I do want to preface things specifically to the Lenz family that I want to commend you for what you have done with that home. It's beautiful. You describe yourself as stewards in your application. I would go beyond that and say you are exemplary stewards for historic preservation, and I hope you're an inspiration to others. I also see from the garage, or rather from the picture, there's a child there, there's the play set, so I imagine you've got kids, and that tiny current garage has got to be aggravating when it comes to a modern vehicle inside a garage that was not designed for that. So I understand what you're looking for, but the bottom line is going to the ordinance and the Secretary of Interior standards is that I am going to vote against demolishing with the information we have. And if demolition is approved, excuse me, I'm going to go against the new design because it does not match. Some of the things that I found that place my position here is in the ordinance, it does talk about economic feasibility to repair or restore, and anything in terms of an estimate for what the cost would be. That would be something that would sway me. I know at the last meeting it was mentioned that economics should not be a factor. Well, I did find in the ordinance that economics are a factor. So I haven't been swayed that it isn't economically or even practical yet to demolish. If it is demolished, though, the standard and the ordinance are very clear that things need to match what was there. And this garage is really a very quaint reminder of what it was like. It's a small garage. It really draws one's eyes to it. And the larger, more modern size shaped garage is just incongruent with the historical context. So those are my positions, having gone over the ordinance and the Secretary's standards. I'm sympathetic to the Lenz's plight. I understand why they want it, but I think this situation is just one of the downfalls of owning a historic home, an older home. I imagine there have been others. This one is just the issue that's before this commission. And that's all I got.
Anybody else on the commission like to speak to this? I will add my comments. In reviewing the application, a couple of things came out. It does not appear that if the existing garage is removed from the property that it would impact the historical listing of the property, which, although it would change the property, I think that's important to note that it would still be listed on the registry. I think that the thing that's important to me is that the new garage is being proposed in the same location as the existing one, and it's not changing the spatial arrangement of the site as far as the house and how it relates to the garage. I do not feel that there's a negative impact to the neighboring properties because of the location of the garage. It's to the north of the adjacent property. It's not an issue of sunlight. It's to the east of obviously the property to the west of it. So again, it's not blocking daylight, that type of thing. And it's also not on the street edge. It's on the far back corner of the lot, furthest from view. The proposed new garage is taller, yes, but I believe it's in proportion to the residence. And so I really don't take exception to it. And while it isn't an exact match of the garage it's replacing, I believe that it's sensitive to the historic nature of both the residents and the neighborhood as a whole. And so based on all those things, and also I would point out that, again, I consider each review of each property individualistic as it's submitted to this commission. And in this instance, I'm in favor of approving this project as it's been submitted. Anybody else on the commission?
I'll add 2 cents too. I concur, Paul, with your perspective on it. I did some additional research on the Wisconsin Historic Properties website, and there's some interesting articles in there. I think if the expansion of this property was not through the garage, then maybe an addition to the existing building would satisfy the needs of the homeowner. Well, I'm not sure that I would like to see an addition to this existing structure that is in very good shape based on the amount of work that they've put into it, to have an addition done to that property. My thought is that if there is an additional space needs, that could be done in the secondary structure, which is the garage. There is, on the state site, one of the indications it again says is, avoid these actions, designing an addition to a false style or time period, and trying to imitate an original design, so you can't tell where one starts and one finishes. There's enough separation, I believe, in the design as proposed to feel like it's compatible, but not mimicking. And so I'm not going to object to this proposal for the same reasons that Paul indicated. Plus, I believe the scale of this is appropriate for the scale of this particular house. And again, these are individual, and the next garage may be something completely different. So this is not a precedent-setting proposal in my mind.
If I could just add too, you may want to include a recommendation in your motion regarding the, other city code that says there's certain height limits, or you may not want to include a recommendation, but I want to bring that to your attention again.
So that's a good point to bring up, Jason. I guess my question would be, and maybe we can't answer this tonight, but is it understood that when an applicant brings a project forth to this commission, regardless of our decision, the applicant is still responsible for obtaining a building permit, and therefore, we're one step in that process?
That's correct. Your recommendation may or may not be implemented.
Yeah, I guess where I'm going is that I don't know, or I'm not aware of what other steps and take to get their building permit.
Well,
And so my recommendation in a motion would simply be that they still need to follow through with the various other departments or approvals necessary.
Yeah, hello, I'm David. I'm a planner with the city. I'm Steph's replacement for the day. Yeah, this is really the first step because a building permit, whether it meets height regulations or setbacks or whatnot, wouldn't even be entertained if Landmarks did not approve the concept. So once that, assuming there is an approval tonight, they would have to still submit for their building permit application. We would check it against setbacks, heights, building code regulations, and they would have to meet those. If they could not, for whatever reason, and there is a safety valve to go to the Board of Appeals, and they would have to prove a hardship at that point. So this is really the first step in the process of getting the structure built. But again, if this one didn't happen, it wouldn't need to go to the others. If that makes sense.
And this is not specific to this application, obviously, but it certainly speaks to the process you just mentioned. And I don't know if it exists or not, but I would guess it would be helpful to the citizens if there was some sort of a flow chart that showed a resident all of the approvals or things they needed to go to take on a project like this. And that may be impossible to do because every project is different. But my concern would simply be that we might have projects come before the Landmarks Commission that we could potentially approve, and they may think they're good to go and start building without getting the necessary building permit approval and things like that. Obviously, I trust that staff is shepherding them through that process, but I'd hate to see a penalized from well, I didn't know that, and assume that our approvals on the Landmarks Commission are all encompassing.
Yeah, and Stephanie sends a response letter after the certificate of appropriateness is approved, and it is spelled out in there that other permits are required, per municipal code. And I'm sure she does walk them through the process. It's really a second step. It's really going to get the building permit. The other stuff I kind of mentioned is all internal to us. But yeah, she does explain that in the letter, and I'm assuming staff, when they speak with the applicants, explain that as well.
Good. So without hearing any other discussion at the moment, I will go ahead and make a motion to approve this request as submitted.
I will second that motion.
Then I would ask if there's more discussion from the committee. Without any more discussion, then I guess I would ask for a roll call vote on the motion. Ron?
Yes. Oh, excuse me.
Alderman Stoyer is absent. Ian?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
David?
No.
Justin is absent. And I would vote yes, so the motion carries 4 yay and 1 nay. Next item on the agenda, item 3, is Certificate of Appropriateness 21-11. This is consideration and possible action on the design review for foundation work, window repair, and storm window installation located at 843 South Monroe Avenue. Jason.
the current slide shows you the property at the corner of Porlier and South Monroe Avenue. On the right, you see 2 photographs of the property, and this one should be pretty quick. They are working with SHPO for tax credits to add storm windows, air conditioning, and do some repointing of the foundation. So next slide shows what the SHPO assigned project conditions are. Bit of an eye chart, but it says something about the air conditioner needs to be hidden, the storm windows need to look a certain way, and the pointing has some requirements on the mortar. Given that SHPO has some oversight on this, I feel confident that they'll do a good job and claim those tax credits. So recommendation is to approve the COA as submitted with these SHPO project conditions incorporated.
Question I have, Jason, is I agree with your statement. If this is being submitted to SHPO, in terms of the confidence of that, what happens if during the course of construction, the property owner decides they don't need the tax credits and then abruptly changes the entire scope of work and does not follow the historic guidelines that SHPO would have enforced?
Well, two things happen. If your approval of the COA is conditional upon them meeting SHPO assigned conditions, then they would first and foremost be in violation of the local municipal code, and they'd be doing work without a COA. Second and separately, they won't get their tax credits. That's kind of the short answer from the state perspective.
Well, and I understand they won't get the tax credits. The concerning thing I would have is if they would decide not to pursue the tax credits and then embark upon a renovation project that would potentially harm the property and not be able to repair it after the fact.
Well, that's why my recommendation to the Landmarks Commission is to incorporate the SHPO assigned project conditions into the COA approval. So it's,
Okay.
then it boxes them into doing all the work required in order to get the tax credits. As to whether or not they choose to finalize that and claim their credits, that's kind of up to them.
Understood. Other comments from the commission?
No, it's a very historic property, very prominent property in the district, and I have every confidence in the homeowner that it will get executed appropriately, and subsequently will make a recommendation for approval.
Would you like to make a motion, Ian?
I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Just that the motion should include that it follows the SHPO conditions.
Correct.
That should be incorporated into there.
Yep.
Yep.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, I'd call for a voice vote on this. Ron?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes,
David?
Yes.
And I would also vote yes, so the motion carries unanimously. Last item under regular business is item 4, Certificate of Appropriateness 21-13, consideration and possible action on a design review for a new sign located at 130 East Walnut Street. Jason?
This building is the Bellin Building. I think you're all familiar with that. Here you see the map showing it at the corner of East Walnut and South Washington Street. The tall-looking photograph is relatively early in its career, and the smaller photograph is from the late 1970s. And I have a lot of photographs to share with you, and I'm kind of afraid that I'm going to forget to mention something, so I may linger a bit. Here in the middle tall photograph, I want you to notice the number of signs mounted directly to the facade. I don't see many on the South Washington Street facade. I do see one projecting on the East Walnut Street facade. And then again in the 1970s smaller photograph on the far right, I still see no signs on the South Washington Street facade. And that really doesn't mean much. I just want to point out to you that maybe somebody had something in mind when they weren't mounting signs for so long. Next slide. There's a lot to talk about here. Top left, there is a preservation brief on this, as there is on many different topics, but preservation brief number 7, written by Pat Tiller. I wanted to give him a little shout out. He was my thesis advisor. And if there's anything I learned about glazed architectural terracotta tile, it's that I don't know enough about it and I should tread lightly. Kind of a unique material. At the top right, you see the previous sign at this location, the black and tan sign. And you're going to see a lot more of that sign as we go through because I just want to have it there as reference. And I'm not saying that that was a good sign or a bad sign, but it shows us some visual bits that, are handy reference points as we go forward. At the bottom left, you see the proposed signage, and at the bottom right, some details on the proposed signage. And here, a little bit of background information is important because Stephanie assures me that the city received an email inquiry about permits. The city responded that the sign owner needs to get a certificate of appropriateness, a sign permit, and a harm hold list. And following that response, the sign owner went ahead and installed the sign without actually having gone through any of these necessary steps. So we don't really have a proposed sign, but rather we have work done without a certificate of appropriateness, a work done without sign permit, and work done without the harm hold list agreement.
The sign permit was sent to you, just so we're clear, for the record.
So today we're, of course, looking at the COA for the first time. And if we go ahead and move to the next slide, on the left you see a general overview of the sign as installed. At the top right, for reference, again, is the black and tan. Again, no judgment on that sign. Immediately below that, we see a little bit of detail on the new sign as installed. And more detail again, bottom right, the new sign as installed. We can go to the next slide. You're going to get tired of my photos. Again, at the top right and middle right, you've seen these photos on the previous slide. That's great. I just wanted to call your attention to the previous mounting of the old black and tan, the large photo on the left, if you will. It has left some holes in the glazed architectural terracotta block and some dirt. And in way of, at least the upper hole there, you see the glaze is no longer present on that block. And at the very bottom of the screen on the right-hand side, you see the little power box or transformer, whatever it is that's been installed. And that's right next to some previous dirt from the previous sign. I guess I've learned a little bit more about terracotta from Pat Tiller. I know that sources of water intrusion are very important to manage. And Preservation Brief number 7 describes what to do. And in the cases of area where the glaze is gone, it should be painted. And in areas where holes are left exposed, they should be filled with a certain type of caulk. And in general, of course, given that you want to minimize points of water intrusion, it's a good idea not to go drilling many holes into this material. So, if we look at the next slide, here are two views of the as-installed sign looking upwards from the sidewalk. On the left, I'm zoomed out a bit so you see the metallic power box near the bottom. And behind the lettering, of course, you see all these kind of silver gray colored spacers. And each one of those spacers is covering a screw that's been drilled directly into the terracotta facade. And information provided by the sign owner states that there are 24 screws or anchors or foundation bits attaching this sign to the facade. So, next slide. In case you ask, this is handy. This is what the ordinance currently states for any work done without a certificate of appropriateness. I'm not asking you to read it right now, but if you have a question, we'll come back to this slide. Is that a good deal? Then moving forward, the recommendation, you'll see the first one's crossed out. As a proposed sign, staff would recommend that the sign be redesigned to minimize the number of penetrations required in the facade. And going one further to maybe hide or dress up the exposed electrical box and the associated wiring. We're not there anymore. As an installed sign, my concern is that any replacement might result in additional damage to the facade. So I would recommend that you keep the sign, but if you want to be a little picky about it, the exposed electrical box and the exposed wiring is a bit inappropriate and, in my opinion, obtrusive, and should either be relocated inside or perhaps powder coated, painted, and made to blend in a bit. Third point here, any new sign to replace the black and tan sign should have required patching of the holes and painting of any damage to the glaze. All this work done in accordance with Preservation Brief number 7. And again, that's because glazed architectural terracotta block is a special creature. It does not like water intrusion, and it's not the sort of resource where you, over the decades, can just keep putting new holes in it and not expect something bad to happen. So, ideally, I think a sign design should have a sign foundation that's semi-permanent, and any new signs and future signs then would mount to that foundation without drilling new holes into the terracotta block. So at this point, I need to turn it over to you. We can look at the pictures again or go to the ordinance or whatever you like. But I guess the recommendation here is that we issue a COA with some conditions. And as the ordinance is written, I don't know that you can waive a fine at this point. I think you could make a recommendation as to what the magnitude of the fine would be, but I leave that to your discussion. Thank you.
Jason, could you go back to the ordinance and leave that up for a minute?
You betcha.
Jason, because there was no certificate of appropriateness for this project, the ordinance states that this gets turned over to the Common Council. What is the mechanism? How does that happen? Do we have to make a motion to do that? Again, this goes back to kind of procedures within City Hall.
So I don't think so. After the Historic Preservation Ordinance was updated to reflect what you see here, some point later, the Common Council identified what the appropriate fine amounts would be, and that is now codified. So you basically look up what is the default fine for this. Now, that's outside of my part of the ordinance book, but if memory serves, I think it's either $1,000 or up to $1,000. I'm not sure what the language is. Either way, I wouldn't let that discourage the Landmarks Commission from making a recommendation here. And again, this is beyond my wheelhouse, but the city machinations will take care of it, is what my understanding is.
Well, it would seem to me that an appropriate fine would certainly be an appropriate amount to cover that cleanup and restoration part of that dirty stuff at minimum. I mean, that should still be taken care of no matter what, because we can't leave that building exposed like that.
Well, you can still make that a condition of the COA, because in order for that sign to remain, a COA is still necessary. So
Yeah, I mean, obviously that repair work still needs to be done and that cleanup needs to be done. I mean, without a question.
Before we would move on to fines or orders to change or remove, I would like to hear from the building owners. There was the one woman that spoke up earlier briefly. Perhaps there are others. So I would make a motion to open the floor to those building owners and associated people.
I'll second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, is there somebody present that would like to speak?
So I am the business owner. I think Heather, who is the representative from the sign company, is there as well. Heather, are you there? Maybe Heather is not there.
Hi. Yes, I'm here.
Oh, you are? Okay, awesome. So does the committee have a specific question, or do you just want us to discuss?
Yeah, Elizabeth, I've got a question for you. I'd like to get your perspective, your side of what your understanding is of your obligation as the business owner under the ordinance, what you're aware or weren't aware of what you needed to do to get this COA, and what you did or didn't do. I'd basically like to hear your side of the story about what transpired.
Sure. So as a new business owner, it was obvious that I needed to take down the old black and tan sign. So I found a new sign company to design the sign that I wanted. We went back and forth a couple of times. I was not aware of a historic committee that needed to approve any sign. I thought it was just the building owner. And then of course the sign permit application. So I went ahead and did that. And that's about it.
Jason or David, perhaps you could enlighten us. She just mentioned a sign permit. What part of the process or what part of the city does that go through?
That would go through our inspection division. So the sign permit application would come in with the attachments, gets to our inspection division. The software they use will kick up a historic designation or in a historic district, if the property's in a district or individually designated, and that'll kick it over to Stephanie Hummel, who's a staff person, or Jason, who are the staff people for the review of alterations to a historic property.
So you're saying that staff would have sent the business owner in response to the application notification about a COA in this commission? Is that accurate?
That is both accurate and, according to Stephanie, if I quote her, if it gets brought up, I'm quoting, for Bell, if it gets brought up, they installed the sign after emailing the city asking about permits. We're told they needed a COA, sign permit, and harm holдлess, and they installed without any of those things, end quote.
Elizabeth, would you be willing to respond to that?
Sure. So, and this is, I did do the sign permit application, and then the other documents, I believe I sent over to Tom after the fact, which I apologize for. But a lot of the information that was required on those forms was the same exact information that was put on the sign permit application. So while I understand that there's forms and those need to be done, the required information was on the sign permit application. Granted, I didn't get approval. I understand that 100%. I'm here right now having to deal with it. But the sign permit application, I thought that I was doing what I needed to do. I had no idea that there was levels upon levels upon levels
So
for approval of this sign. I did not think it was that big of a deal.
in no instance does a sign permit get approved before the COA has been issued.
I understand that now. I did not understand that in the beginning.
So the sign application permit was submitted, but you didn't get there wasn't an approval of that permit application.
Correct.
Okay. So you indicated you're the new business owner.
Correct.
I thought I understood that it wasn't, it was a name change, not a new venture.
Well, I mean, technically it's operating under the same LLC as the Black and Tan, doing business as Slander. So I guess you could look at it two different ways. operating under the same legal entity, but doing business as a different restaurant. So it doesn't serve the same food as the old Black and Tan. It looks different than the Black and Tan, but in terms of the legal entity, it's the same. Does that make sense?
Sure. So yeah, okay. I guess, is there any other information that the owner or the sign applicant wants to share with this commission, or should we go back into regular business?
I don't know if we want to reiterate the email that Heather had sent, providing more information on the sign. I don't know if that interests the committee at all.
What would that include?
If I may, my name is Heather. I am from Signorama. And I guess I'd like to speak to the fixing of what's been done. In the past, whenever we've gotten a sign applicant or a sign permit, I've never been asked for a COA before. We did go ahead and get an obstruction permit because of where the work was taking place. We had one for the removal of the existing, and then we had another for the installation. Obviously, any of the cleanup, the patching of the holes, changing the cover of the electrical box, that can all be done, absolutely.
Without making more holes?
Well, to fill the holes that were left from the Black and Tan sign, to clean the dirt that's there. He mentioned painting the chipped part where the glaze was gone, and painting the electrical box, hiding the wires, that work. Not creating more holes, no.
Other question for you, since you're the sign installer, is it feasible to move that electrical box out of sight?
To take it inside would mean an additional hole, and because the junction box, the power does come outside, and that was existing, that was there. So to get rid of that, it would leave another hole.
And a new one would be required.
And we'd need a new one to get the wires into the building.
The wire.
Why wouldn't you just use the same hole that's already through the building?
I believe wasn't the electrical box that was already there from the Black and Tan sign? I think that's what she's saying.
Right, the power coming out of the building.
Sure, but that sign is no longer there. So now the box is exposed, that the gray conduit, the flexible conduit that's coming out.
On the bottom, yes.
Yep.
On the right-hand picture, on the bottom there, that was the pipe that was existing.
Sure. So why could that box not be inside and feed?
Through that same hole?
Yes.
I suppose. And then the wires, I would be open to suggestions on that as well.
Wire would still have.
Because the location of the sign, it's much shorter, much smaller than what the Black and Tan was. If we take the sign all the way over to that existing hole, it'll be hidden by the tree. It'll be on the corner. I'm not sure if that would be feasible to move the sign.
My thought is that it's a piece of conduit that comes from the existing penetration and runs horizontally over to the sign. The conduit's painted out to match the terracotta.
And if the conduit needs to be anchored to the wall, it should be done in the joint and not in the face of the terracotta.
Understood.
Could you go back one? Could you go back one slide? Yeah, I mean, the wire that actually runs from the conduit to the slander sign is very thin.
Yes.
I don't see any reason why that whole box couldn't be inside, just that thin wire run out. right along a seam, right along, the seam right there.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Unless there's any more comments from either of the two folks that have spoken, I'm going to make a motion to close the floor, return to normal.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Where are we at, folks? We've got a recommendation by city staff. That essentially is saying that we want the terracotta cleaned up, sealed where the existing holes were, and we'd like the electrical box relocated to the inside of the building, which I think we kind of just discussed, seems to be possible. Is there anything else that anybody is concerned with?
There was discussion before about fines for this. I'm a law and order guy, but I understand that this is a new ordinance. It's not necessarily an obvious one that a business owner would inherently recognize the need for. You did acknowledge that you're negligent doing the work before the permit was initiated, so I appreciate your honesty. But I am reluctant to impose a fee or a fine rather at this time, simply because I'm recognizing the fact that this is not an inherently obvious thing. The only thing I would ask the business owner of is please do share with everybody else in that building the realities of the Bellin building, that a permit needs to be passed through this commission. But based on that, I am reluctant to impose a fine.
So David, in response to that, the question that I don't understand or that's not really clear is whether or not there were actual sign permits granted for this work. And if they were, obviously that was a mistake somewhere in City Hall. Those permits never should have been granted without coming before this commission first.
The sign permit itself still has not been granted. That's pending the COA.
That's my understanding. She applied for a permit and then just went ahead and did the work without waiting for a permit, even though she received a letter from the city stating what needed to be done.
But there
Starting with
was an
landmarks.
obstruction permit that was approved, as my understanding.
So I can't speak to that, but my hunch is that there's no flag on sidewalk closure permit. It's presumed that you know what you're doing at that point.
But there is a signage ordinance,
There is.
Correct.
and there should have been a permit granted to put the sign up.
Correct.
That permit specifically was not granted because it had yet to go through the Landmarks Commission, among other things, the hold harmless, and what's the other one? Maybe that's all three.
I'm not sure that the fine is something that we can take action on or not, or if that clearly falls in city council's purview.
We just recommend there should be a fine and then city council.
No, I think Jason indicated that fine structure is already laid out.
That's right. That's right. They already have that set up.
Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, and I apologize. My memory, I live in certain chapters of the ordinance, and I don't live in that one so much. But where my memory is unclear is if it's an up to amount or a prescribed this amount. I think it was a prescribed this amount, but we'd have to take a look. And if it's an up to, then perhaps a recommendation would have some sway.
If I may, is that okay? Because I looked for the ordinances. I'm pretty familiar with reading those. And I did not see any type of ordinance paragraph that dictated an amount of fine. And it doesn't seem like any of you know either. So a reasonable person, how am I supposed to
Well, then
How am I supposed to know?
I do have in front of me the fine structure, and we are aware of it. It's 13-1514, and very simply, it can be up to $50 a day per violation that we make as a recommendation that is issued by the development director, and that the fines ultimately are established by the Common Council. So yes, it very much exists. As Jason says, it's buried, but it does exist.
Well, and in a separate section, there's a blanket statement, a different chapter that says if you've done the work without a COA, there's, it's like your first tier thing. There's a fine. I forget if it's 1,000 or up to 1,000, but it's very prescriptive that this is one of our standard fines, and I forget which chapter it is, but I've got two people here looking for it, if that's any consolation. So the $50 a day is for, say, if somebody's done work without a COA and you don't issue a COA, for example, if you say, no, we refuse to grant a COA for this sign, then you can impose that $50 a day fine until they correct the situation, in addition to the fine that was already levied for work done without the COA in the first place.
My concern with this discussion is that the applicant has hired a professional sign company to do this work, and so there's no excuse for the work having proceeded without having the proper permits in place. It may not be fair or right, but I would be more sympathetic to a private property owner doing work on their own residence and not understanding that. But that's not what we're discussing here. We're discussing a commercial building with a commercial contractor that doesn't have the appropriate permits in place.
I think to add to that, we've reviewed several sign permits since this ordinance has been in place, and so it's not the first person to go through this ordinance as it's currently written. So that gives me some pause also.
And I think the ordinance has been in place for nearly 3 years now.
Else had a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
Heather here. May I speak to that?
Sure.
I guess the onus on me would have been not to go forward without the permit in hand. This particular case, we were doing the work. The business owner was applying for the permit.
Didn't want to pay for the expense.
We do charge for that service. If we get the permitting and go through all that, we charge for that. This is a new business owner, wanted to save some money on that end, and she was going to go through that process herself. So I guess that's where error occurred on both our parts there.
Thanks for the clarification on that. I guess the other piece, Jason, all the property owners in the historic district did receive notification that this ordinance, when it was being considered and when it was approved, I presume that they all received indications that there was a process and additional ordinances.
Yes, and that came after letters saying that there was a proposed historic district and letters saying we're having public hearings to discuss a proposed historic district, and letters saying we're discussing changing the ordinance, and letters saying that the ordinance goes before council tonight. So yes, at every one of these gates, a letter was sent to the property owners.
The issue you've got here is that the work is being done by a tenant and not the property owner or landlord.
Understood. I think it's just important that we know that that work was done, or that the work from the city was done, and those were, I mean, that information should be relayed not only from the building owners, but from, I would suggest, the Downtown Green Bay Inc. Board, maybe, that that notification that these permits are required should be further enhanced and shared with not only the building owners, but the tenants also.
I think it goes back to that. The city did send a letter when the permit was applied for. And the tenants, of what needed to be done.
Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion regarding the structure itself, and separate out the issue of a fine. My motion is that, they be directed to repair, all damage, whether it was pre-existing or a result of the installation, to the satisfaction of this commission, as well as move that electrical box inside.
Could we have the repair be done with the appropriate material?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
somebody
Yeah.
just doesn't go and get a tube of caulk and,
That's why I say to the satisfaction of this commission, and essentially that'd be in the form of staff making visits.
And that's fine. Preservation brief number 7 from the Department of the Interior's Park Service is fairly prescriptive in saying what type of caulk to use, and they mentioned paint for where glaze is gone. I forget I think they're prescriptive in saying a latex or some other type of paint. So if you include preservation brief number 7 in your motion, that would give us some firm, benchmark to refer to.
I will modify my motion, exactly what Jason just said.
I would second that motion.
Yeah.
Any other discussion then? We have a motion on the floor and a second.
Did this-
Hearing none.
Just a quick question. Did this motion include an approval of the COA or not? My memory gets a little sketchy.
No, it did not, but that would be appropriate, and I'll amend my motion to include approval of COA with the caveats I stated before.
And did the second to that motion agree to the amendment?
I do.
Thank you.
So any further discussion on the motion? Just so we're clear, my understanding is there's a motion to approve the COA requiring the existing terracotta facade to be repaired per, were those National Park Service guidelines, Jason?
Yes, Department of the Interior, National Park Service Preservation Brief number 7, written by DeTeal, Patterson, Tiller.
Requiring the terracotta to be cleaned and repaired per those National Park Service guidelines, and also the relocation of the electrical box to the interior of the building. I think that's where we left off.
Yes, Paul, that's exactly my motion.
Okay, roll call vote, Ron,
Yes.
Ian,
Yes.
Susan,
yes,
David.
Yes.
I will also vote yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're on to item F, staff level applications.
oh, do we have a matter of the fine, or do we have not, or don't we have any input regarding the fine from the city regarding the sign?
At this
on the back.
point, the $50 a day isn't an issue because you've granted a COA. There is still a question of what the, base fine is for work having been done without a COA. I can't tell you exactly what that is right now. If you want to make a motion recommending lesser or more, I'm afraid I just don't have that ordinance section in front of me to tell you what the city will be doing behind the scenes after this meeting.
I'm just going to make an assumption that the inspection division is the ones who are going to want to look into the fact that they've had a sign installed without the permits granted.
Yes, that's a separate fine as well, I believe, but, that's a discussion to be had by others, not me.
I make a suggestion, we table the issue of a fine until staff can prepare a report on the fee structure, rather than try and find it on the fly.
Have more information.
Agreed.
You can do that. I can't guarantee that it won't already happen before that report is prepared. The
I'll make a
ordinances are,
motion, we table an issue of a fine until next meeting.
I'll second that
Second.
motion.
Any other discussion?
Just one thing, just one quick thing. As far as the fine goes, I don't necessarily see that the business owner is as culpable as the sign installer. Now, I don't know if that's broken down in the codes or, through the city or not, but I mean, when this building would have been notified, she wasn't even the owner yet, nor was she probably even in the building at that time. I mean, I can't speak for when she was there, but at that particular moment, she wasn't the owner. When they were notified of the COA process and all that originally, of the historic nature of that building. So,
But subsequently, LC staff did send the information that did state the various things that need to be sought, and that was not complied with.
sure. Well, that's why it's good to table this, I suppose, because we can really look into those items better. Okay, that's all.
Go ahead.
Okay, this is Dave again. Typically, so what happens if you do work without a permit, regardless if you're in the historic or not, the permit fees are either doubled or tripled, depending on the criteria inspection uses. I believe any fine which is set by the council is probably going to be a set amount, or like Jason had said, an up to amount. I don't know if the Landmarks Commission is going to have any control over implementing or not implementing that fine. That's something that's going to go through the regular city mechanisms. Generally, the fines, my understanding, typically go to the property owner. Because ultimately it's the owner's responsibility to watch his tenants and not to do stuff in his building. So that is typically what happens. Obviously, landlords typically would send that fine down to whoever did the work or take them to court or whatever. But that's typically how it goes. I kind of was trying to dig around the municipal code. I did not find that, and I'm not a landmark staffer, but I didn't find the penalties, what they are. But I'm guessing it's not going to be at the judgment of the Landmarks Commission. It's going to be a flat fine.
Well, this is precedent for us. We have never, as a commission, ever seriously examined fining anybody. So again, I'd like to urge that we table this as I moved next month, so that we can get the information and we can get it right. Because if we're doing this for the first time, let's do it right.
Okay.
Well, but
I
I think the discussion, David, is simply we don't necessarily have the power to do anything in this regard, that it's not, this commission is not the deciding body on that, it's the Common Council.
I believe you're correct, and depending on how it's worded, it may not even be a common council may not have the ability to change it. Correct. But obviously we can report back to you, and if it is something that's a judgment call by the Landmarks Commission, we will hold off any type of fines that are going to go out or be processed until you can obviously speak about it. And we'll also kind of get you up to date on what those fees are and what the processes are. But I would recommend as a staff member that if you made a motion to recommend there be no fine because this is a new ordinance and a new tenant and, it's just confusing time, you could make that. It might not have any weight, but at least if it does, it's already out there. Would be my recommendation. Doesn't hurt to make the recommendation if that's what you're looking to do.
So it's on the floor that we're essentially tabling the issue of a fine until the next meeting.
Correct, to give staff a chance to prepare a report instead of the uncertainty we're hearing now.
Did anybody else want to comment on this before we vote on that motion? Okay, by the roll, Ron?
Yes.
Ian?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
David?
Yes.
Vote yes, so motion carries unanimously. Now I believe we're on to item F, which would be staff level applications.
There were 2 applications for staff level approval. We're looking for them. One was a fence. Yep, there we go. A fence at 1120 South Quincy. We approved it. And the other one at, oh shoot, I didn't list the address there. Well, at the house on the bottom right, they're replacing precast concrete porch steps with basically identical precast concrete porch steps. So we approved that. That approval noted, of course, that the handrails and the newel posts would have to be the subject of a separate COA because they were silent in their application in the first place. But as it stands now, they can replace the concrete steps and not replace the handrails. So. Any questions on either of these 2?
No.
Then if you'd like to move on to next slide, next topic.
Raise and repair orders.
None that have come my way.
Okay. Staff update.
No, it's been a good month. I guess the update there is that the intensive level survey did start. I rode around in a car with Rowan from Legacy Architecture for 3 days, and we've completed the phase 1 windshield reconnaissance survey. And at this point, we're now looking into the history of buildings that were noted for inclusion in the inventory of things. I don't know that anything in particular jumped out as spectacular. From my perspective, I was a little surprised in reading the railroad swing bridge in the middle of the river, dates from 1895, probably eligible for National Register listing. But beyond that, there were a few neat ones that we all know about at different points. I don't know if any of them will be individually National Register eligible. And it seemed that we did not find any districts in the phase 1 area, which is the near west side. I just don't think there were any districts that popped out. So.
Okay. Any other business from any of the committee members?
No.
Hearing none, the date of our next meeting is Wednesday, July 14th, 2021. I guess I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Well, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to adjourn carries unanimously. Thank you, everybody. See you next month.
I
Thank you.
hope to have a positive report on the use of the term portico share over a tactical radio channel. I really want to.
When you accomplish that, we'll come up with another significant architectural term for you to work on next.
I don't think we can force this thing. It took 2.5 years to come up with portico share, so yeah, I'll let you know.
I would hate to think that
good.
there would be a
Have a good
portico
evening,
share
everyone.
arsonist. But
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks.